This oat flour bread requires no flour, yeast, or kneading to make a delicious homemade gluten-free bread using 100% oats. Hi, I'm Melissa Erdelak from the gluten-free website, mamagourmand.com, and today we are going to make oat flour bread. This is an awesome option for those of you who are intimidated by making gluten-free bread. You just put everything in a blender, puree it, pour in a pan, bake, and that's it. I use my own oat flour. I make it in the blender first, but you could also use purchased oat flour, but also don't. Stay tuned and I will explain how easy it is and why you should just make your own oat flour at home. So let's make your gluten-free life a success and not a hot mess. So we start the recipe by making the oat flour. Since it all comes together in the blender, this is why I say you should just make your oat flour first. So for it, you need 2.5 cups of quick oats, and make sure you're using certified gluten-free oats. I use Bob's Red Mill brand, but there's other brands out there you can use. Whatever amount of quick oats you put in, that's how much oat flour you will get. So you just pour it into the blender. If you don't have a high-speed blender, you can also use a food processor. You'll get the same result. It'll just be a little bit of a coarser texture, so it'll be more of like a rustic grain bread than like a fluffy bread. Once you blend it together for about 30 seconds to a minute, you have your oat flour. Now, buying gluten-free oats is a lot more affordable than buying oat flour, which is why I just recommend using oats, especially if you have a high-powered blender. I use a Vitamix, a Blendtec works as well, but other people have used their blenders at home and that's fine too. I used to make this recipe without the psyllium husk powder, but then as I started experimenting with it with my other gluten-free bread recipes, I knew it would be great for this as well. Oat flour bread has no gluten in it, so there's nothing to bind anything together. The taste still is the same, but the problem is when you cut it, the pieces fall apart a little bit more. So the psyllium husk powder just helps with that. It absorbs the moisture, it helps bind the crumb together. This is the brand that I use, and I will link to it in the description because what you'll find is some psyllium husk powders are darker in color. And the weird baking science is if you use a darker psyllium husk powder, it turns your baked goods purple. I have no idea why, but I get a lot of comments from people that says, why is my bread purple? And I know it's because they've used a darker psyllium. I have 2 that I use. I'll link to both of them below. This is the color of the psyllium. It should be lighter texture and it's really fine powder. Baking powder, baking soda, and salt. And then I will add the wet ingredients on top. So 3/4 of a cup of milk. If you need this to be dairy-free, you can use dairy-free milk as well. 1/4 of a cup of oil, and for this, use any oil you prefer. And 1/4 of a cup of honey. And then you will need 3/4 cup of yogurt. And then finally, just 2 eggs. And then just blend that all together. I recommend stopping about halfway through to scrape everything down just to make sure you have all the dry ingredients at the bottom of the blender. At this point, the batter is pretty thin, as you can see, which is fine because oats really absorb liquid, and as it sits and as it bakes, it's definitely going to get thicker. But the last thing we add is just a cup of regular rolled oats, and we're just going to pulse that in just for a few seconds just to mix through without. We don't want it to blend completely with it, just kind of mix in with the batter. See what I mean? The batter really gets thick after it's just been sitting for a couple minutes. You're gonna pour this into a greased 8x4 inch loaf pan. I really recommend that 8x4 inch size because the batter is the perfect amount for that, and when it bakes, it'll get that nice dome shape on top. You can use a bigger bread pan, you can use a 9x5. Your bread will just be a little bit flatter across the top and it won't need as long of a time to bake. All right, once your batter is in, go ahead and just spread the top evenly. And to give it a little nice touch, I just sprinkle some more oats on top. You're gonna bake it in a 350 oven for about 50 to 55 minutes. And to check if it's done, the best and easiest way to do it is use an instant read thermometer. It should read 200 degrees in the middle. Look how beautiful this bread is. It tastes just like traditional oatmeal bread with that hint of sweetness from the honey. It has a nice soft texture. I like to slice it and toast it with peanut butter and bananas, but you can also use it for grilled cheese or sandwiches or just for an on-the-go snack. You can find the full printable recipe on my website, mamagourmand.com, and I will also link to it in the description below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.